I first met David when he was 4 days old, and he's the same today as he was then, a free spirit let loose upon the world. David always loved downtowns, and DCI was a natural fit.
I think the strength that David has is he gets to the personalities and the individuals. He doesn't see a class of people. He's like, okay, I want to learn stories.
When David and I both came into DCI, I can't remember what time that was, the mid-1990s, I think. Downtown was really on the rocks. I mean, there were big problems. We take for granted the downtown we have now. That was not the downtown we had in the mid-90s.
The time that he has been around, he has been totally committed and focused on making this city as good as it possibly can be. And he took on major challenges in the 90s when I was mayor, when things were a little rough.
Yeah, I think back to those really tough days in 2002 when DCI's very existence was at stake.
Look at Cincinnati today. We do have retail. Some of it's in the Central Business District. Some of it is in what is now called OTR. And there are people living all over the Central Business District where there were not. So it turns out that David is a soothsayer, and he had a winning strategy.
The ability to look back in time to say, what did David see 10 years ago? And David saw things that was hard to see, but yet we are there.
And David and I met often for breakfast in that time.
We went out to breakfast together because all of my meetings with David were over breakfast.
One time I remember we were having breakfast, which I ended up paying for.
Some of my favorite memories with David actually are when I was his board chair. I would pick up coffee for him in the morning and a cup of tea for myself and come and sit in his office with him and start the day. I believe it was Tuesdays, but we would start the day together, thinking ahead of what was in the week ahead, looking back on what the weekend had been, and really just spending that time in the morning to set the course of the day and the rest of the week.
You know, he would send me a text at 7:30, 7:45, asking me if I wanted to meet at First Watch at 8:30. And it was really interesting and enjoyable to say, I'm going to go have breakfast with David. Not just because I'm eating food and David's sitting there, as much as I get the insights and the feedback and the putting things in perspective that David was able to do. And it was an honor to sit there. It was not about food and just presence. It was about the conversation and the subject matter.
And he was very accessible, very down to earth. He's a great listener, and we would just talk over breakfast. I would tell him about my career goals and ask him all sorts of questions about his experience. And I felt like I was with a local celebrity because at First Watch, he knew pretty much everyone there.
It was a lot of work to get the property owners downtown to approve, the district and to pay for the money that supports DCI, and Dave is so good at doing that. Again, because he works so well with the building and the property owners.
David is always on the front line of making sure the renewal takes place smoothly and meets that big number of 60% of approval. And yet somehow we always get much closer to 80% approval. And that's all because of David making that happen. And it kind of happens behind the scenes.
And I remember seeing David and meeting with him in Bobby Stern's office. And this was where we were talking about how do we actually develop a downtown Christmas shopping campaign. And I just remember the look on David's face. I mean, he had been working so hard and doing so much, but this was a big step up. Not for him, because he was quite capable of doing it, but a big step up in terms of the types of resources and logistics that would be involved. Once he kind of got over the shock of the discussion, he did what he always did. He shouldered the burden, and he worked with the rest of the staff at DCI to put together the first campaign.
David Ginsburg stepped up, created a clear vision focused on the basics like clean and safe and serving the property owners and making downtown everybody's neighborhood.
David was really key in shaping the culture of DCI in its earliest years. And then he became CEO, and that just continued all this time.
Downtown hosted the World Choir Games, and it was really fabulous, huge success, and we were all pretty happy about it. So afterwards, David said to me, that was great, Mindy, but now we need to host the Super Bowl. And I'm like, oh my heavens, this guy really thinks big. I better get on board and think as big. And I've never forgotten that moment.
And he came up with the incredibly inspired idea of having the outreach workers downtown and became one of the biggest homeless advocates in our city unwittingly. So yeah, that's my story with David.
Yeah, I think cities don't probably do enough of that, and I think that's really what he was able to do in his years as CEO, is really deal with the sort of unseen players in the downtown, which when you put it all together makes a successful downtown, in addition to the big projects. But that's really the mark that he's left on our downtown, is dealing with sort of its soft side.
But how much David was feet on the street. You know, from the time he parked his car in the morning and then made his way on foot to the office, but then just throughout the day, he was just being the eyes and ears for himself, out to see what's the vibe on the sidewalks, what are people talking about, what needs a little more attention. That's a pretty unique approach to a job that frankly requires something like that, and he was a master at getting that done.
He made me feel very seen by him. And lots of times, as a person of color, I'm always maybe the only one in the room. And it was nice to know that David was not only looking out for me, but he was also championing me. And he was helping make rooms more diverse.
I think back to the benchmarking trips that we took to cities like Portland and Indianapolis. On those trips, David said, we'll know we've made it when cities come to Cincinnati to benchmark. And that's happened big time.
If there's something that sticks out, I would say that what I've learned from David over the years is the importance of, I'll call it, knowing your product. David Ginsburg knows downtown Cincinnati in every nook and cranny in a way that nobody could possibly compete with.
Something I've learned from David Ginsburg over the years is the importance of downtown to support the region, that we're not an island to ourselves, that we're important for entities and cities throughout. And that's something that you take a lot of ownership with for the entire region.
Something I learned from David, keeping in touch, I think, is what he is. He's good at a lot of things, but I think maybe he's best at that, is calling people when there's really no reason to call them, just to see how things are going, how we doing, what are you hearing, what are you seeing around downtown, what can we do better.
Passion for his job. He loves Cincinnati, he loves his job, he loves what he does, he loves what he promotes, and he's very so likable. I mean, everybody likes David because he has great people skills, and he uses them everywhere, with company presidents, with politicians, with the man on the street. That's just the way David is.
David loves his dogs. And sometimes I don't recognize him when I am leaving work on Hyde Park Square, and there's this guy walking around the square with these two big dogs, and then I realize that's David Ginsburg out of uniform.
We got married at the observatory, and David's dog, Bagels, was our ring bearer.
Genuinely loves to help them solve problems. He respects people of all backgrounds and cultures, and it all comes from his heart.
I love his virtue of empathy. I feel like David's a person that you can kind of come and have a really authentic conversation with, and he leads from the heart. So you really get, among a lot of things, that he really does care.
What I've learned most about is the importance of listening. When you listen, people feel valued. And when they feel valued, change can happen. Listening is David's secret sauce.
So once again, we cheer him on his path forward.
And if I had to give you any advice, it would be to pour into yourself as much as you pour into our city and everyone else. So this is time for you to sort of follow your heart's desire, take that break, hang out with the dogs, and find that new path and go into it with just zeal and gust that I know you already have inside of you.
The thing I would say, David, is thank you. It's been wonderful what you've done for the city, and I consider you a good friend, and I thank you for that friendship.
I wish you all the best in whatever next adventure you're having, but I know that whatever you do, you're going to have people in your heart, and you're going to be making the world a better place. So I wish you all the luck.
I know he'll be productive and happy no matter where he is.
My sign off to you, David, is for many years you've been a mentor, a leader. Keep things in perspective, and I'm honored to know you and honored to have learned from you, whether it's leadership, downtown, or really sometimes the importance of life in general. And for that, I appreciate it, and I thank you, and I wish you the best of luck for many, many years to come.
Of course, a big thank you to you, David. It's been more than a pleasure working with you at Downtown Cincinnati Incorporated all these years. I wish you the very best, and I hope you know that DCI is in good hands. We will keep it alive and well, I promise you, and we will never stop thinking big and having big, big expectations. Thank you.
Thank you for being at the beginning and now in the middle of Cincinnati's wonderful transformation, and thank you for helping to make it happen.
Thank you, David, for everything. Thanks for being a listening ear. Thanks for coming to my MBA graduation.
And I want to wish the best to he and Pamela as they go on with their lives. And there's just such a great couple.
Congratulations on a great run, Mr. Downtown, and thank you.
So now that David no longer has the responsibility of keeping downtown Cincinnati clean, I'm hoping that he'll get to work on the yellow room in our house.
Something I learned from David Ginsburg. Well,
Excuse me, can I interrupt you for just a second? John, you got to see this in my office. There's a lady. She's standing by the ticket machine there. She's been there for 30 minutes trying to get a streetcar ticket. You got to see this. You got to see this. You got to see it.
Okay, my understanding is, this is my understanding, that David is not allowed to smoke cigars. Maybe it's not smoke cigars in the house, or not smoke cigars in the office, or I don't know. There's some parameters around his cigar smoking, and I think that when he walks the dogs, he probably walks the dogs a lot so he can smoke a cigar. That's my understanding.
I never saw him smoke a cigar, but when he was 13 years old for his birthday, I bought him a pipe, and for several years he and I smoked pipes together and thoroughly enjoyed it, until his father presented us with a copy of the Surgeon General's report on smoking.
And one of the things, David and I both love bagels, and I remember David telling me you can't eat bagels, and how many carbs they were. And you could go to Marx's and buy the low carb bagels, but they weren't any good. Well, more recently I've been on a low carb diet, and so what I do, I think of David, what I do is go to Bruegger's and have them cut out the middles, so I have thin bagels.
You never want to take a walk with David in downtown Cincinnati if you have to be somewhere on time or quickly, because he will meet someone and talk to someone in about every block or more often. And those are important conversations that he has and that we all want him to have.
I know this is all about David, but I think Pam deserves a shout out. Pam, you've been an awesome partner to Mr. Downtown. I can't imagine you've had an uninterrupted hour, given that David insists on giving his personal cell phone out to everyone.
Nobody else has talked about the Scotty dogs?
No, I think I killed it.
Yeah, you did. That was great.